Hi and welcome back and Happy New Year. Today for my New Year special I'm going to be demonstrating a line and wash of the Eilean Donan castle in Scotland, a very famous landmark, and seeing as it's Hogmanay tonight, Scottish New Year, it seemed a very fitting subject matter. This is just a summary of the process. A full 3-part tutorial including the line work, the sketch and the reference photograph for you to download are available on Patreon, so if you're interested in that, please follow the link below. I started off, as I always do with line and wash, by trying to get a reasonably accurate but simplified sketch from my reference photograph. Just pulling out the main points and trying to get a reasonable likeness of the castle without getting overly detailed or complex. But once the sketch is right in pencil, then I will go over it with waterproof black fine liners. And today I'm using a new set of Pigma Microns that my daughter gave me for Christmas, and they're really lovely fine liners. They're very different from the Faber-Castell Pitt pens that I usually use, but I shall be using these more often because they are really smooth and really nice to draw with. The paper I'm using is 100% cotton watercolour paper made by Saunders Waterford, and it's cold pressed. It's £140 or 300 gram weight, and it's taped to my board. When I paint, I'll have my board at 45 degrees so that gravity will help me with the painting. But if you prefer to do your line work, your sketching and your drawing on a flat surface, then you may find that easier. Line and wash is a different process from ordinary watercolour painting. With pure watercolour, you generally work from light through to dark, but with line and wash, first of all, the main difference is that you draw a sort of outline, and with painting you're trying to lose the line, you're trying not to have outlines. So we've got an outline, but also with this black ink we are creating our darkest darks straight away. We're putting in all the shadows, we're blocking out things like windows, foliage, any areas that we want to really stand out and be our darkest darks and really contrast against the painted areas. Those get blocked in or hatched or cross-hatched. You can change up from a thin fine liner to a thicker one to put in heavier lines, such as those underneath the eaves, or for putting in windows, all that sort of thing. Line and wash is a kind of process that you can really make it as easy as you want or as complicated as you want, and it depends on the kind of look that you're going for and how much time you have available. But if you can really simplify your sketch, your photograph down to just a few basic shapes, then your line work can be incredibly sketchy, very loose and very simple. Or you could take every detail and spend a lot of time doing a really beautiful job on your line work and create a very detailed painting with very simple, clean washes across the detailed line work. So it's completely up to you how you tackle this interesting genre of painting, and it can be very, very satisfying. I think I sort of wandered off on a bit of a tangent there, so let's get back to that. So the 3 main stages of a line and wash is, firstly, your darkest darks that you put in with the ink. Secondly, areas that you leave unpainted will create your lightest lights. And then finally, once you're happy with the line work, then you can put in all of your mid-tones using your paint. So as I say, it's quite a different process, but it can be very satisfying. It can also be a really good way of improving on your drawing or your sketching skills. and it's somehow a little bit easier, I think, with this, even though it's quite time consuming getting the sketch right and the line work right. I think once you've got that done, that's nearly all the work done, and all you need to do is use a couple of well-placed loose washes just to bring the whole painting together. So the line work might take quite a long time to do, but the actual painting part is probably going to take you less than 5 minutes, unless you decide to do a really detailed painting. You can see that the line drawing is nearly done. I'm just doing some final cross-hatching to bring in some slightly more subtle shading. Just trying to make sure that the castle is recognisable as the Eilean Donan. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Apologies if I'm not. Making sure those shadows really work well in the arches. Just a little bit of detail of the brickwork, not too much. This is one of the finest fine liners. I think it's the 0.02, and it's giving me some very pale fine lines that kind of give me that detail I want without it being too heavy. And once I finish the ink work, I'll leave it to dry for about 10 minutes, just in case some of the heavier areas are still a little bit damp. It becomes completely waterproof once it's fully dry, so I always leave it for a few minutes. I'm using my large Pro Art Hake brush to wet the sky, cutting around the building. I don't mind if I get some of the sky colours into the building, but I'm going to try and preserve some of them, and then putting some water across the foreground as well. The idea is to then paint wet in wet, and just to try and build up something sort of atmospheric that kind of evokes the rugged, stormy, windswept and bleak landscape of the Highlands. So I'm using my usual sort of fairly grungy, earthy colours. I'm using raw sienna, sepia and indigo, and a bit later I'll use some burnt sienna. I'm putting it across very strongly to start with, but then I shall add some water to my brush and pull that water across the painting and allow everything to blend, run down the page, so that the colours dilute, and I'm left with that atmospheric wash that goes across most of the painting. If you follow along at home, then please feel free to use any colours that you like when you paint in your line and wash. The line work really is quite neutral. You could go any way you wanted with painting. Once you've done the line work, you could keep it light and bright and paint sort of the green grass around the castle and a beautiful blue sky. You could turn it into a sunset picture, but I quite like it with this oncoming storm and this strange uncanny light that you get when a late evening storm is just about to blow in and the sun is quite low in the sky. So I can tip and tilt my board to control the run of my wash, and you can see that it's softened back, and most of those harsh lines that went in to start with have all diffused and blended together, and it's really looking interesting. Getting some colour into the foreground now, the same colours, so just various mixes of raw sienna, indigo and sepia. And then once I'm happy with the base wash, I'll come in with some burnt sienna just to add that glow of uncanny light across the castle and the causeway and reflect a little tiny bit of it into the land. getting in some shadows too from all those colours mixed together. As you can see, I'm not being really careful about my painting. I was careful about my line work. Once that was right, then now I'm just using the paint to build up the midtones, but mostly to build up the atmosphere. And that's what I'm looking for. You could take the approach of sort of a colouring in approach when you do line and wash, and there's nothing wrong about that. Of course, there's no wrong or right way to do this. Any approach that you like, anything that you're comfortable with, is the way to go, really. I just like splashing paint around and experimenting and seeing what happens. So I get to the final stages of this first and main wash, and I'm just looking across the whole painting and deciding where I need to add a little bit more paint, but still trying to leave a few patches of white of the paper. Once it's all dry, I can come back and add some finishing touches if I need them, but for the time being, I'm trying to make sure that I don't overwork the painting. I like the atmosphere that's been created, so I'm going to work with that and leave it to dry. Now it's completely dry, I can see that I need to darken up the water, so I'm just using a very weak mixture of the colour that I put across the foreground earlier and pulling that across the page. Now that's a mixture of raw sienna, indigo and a little bit of sepia. You can see that just gives me some differentiation in tone between the water and the distant hills. Now this is some fairly rich burnt sienna, and I'm just pulling up that kind of glow on the building. The castle isn't this colour in real life. I'm not using local colour. This is where I'm using my artistic licence to build up a sort of the kind of atmosphere that I can see in my mind, the sort of atmosphere that I want. As I say, this sort of intense light that you sometimes get with an approaching storm late afternoon when the sun is very low in the sky. If you'd rather not paint the burnt sienna on the building, just leave it out. You know, it's your painting. You can use whatever colours appeal to you. That's what it's all about. We all kind of have a sort of unique vision about how we want something to look. And it's a really good idea to sort of work towards that and not sort of slavishly try to copy photographs or tutorials. Take what you want from the tutorials, make it your own, and then apply those methods and techniques to your own paintings as well. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm quite happy with the way this has turned out. I'm going to remove the tape just to double check that everything looks all right. Removing the tape and seeing the white border allows us to see the painting with fresh eyes, and I can see that I want to pull out a highlight on the building just here. So scrubbing into that with a bit of clean water and then dabbing it out with a tissue after a few seconds, and I've just lightened that area up a little bit, just lifted a bit of the paint off. And maybe a little bit of shadow on either side of that long chimney on the smaller part of the castle. And I think I'm fairly happy with that. I think I've captured the atmosphere that I wanted. And if we look closer, hopefully you can see that there's nothing sort of too detailed here. It's just very scratchy, sort of scribbling and hatching and cross-hatching to give us our darks. We've got a few light areas and lighter washes, but mostly the paint has given us our midtones. So I hope that was helpful. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thank you so much to my lovely Patreon group who support this channel. And wishing you all a very happy and healthy new year and happy painting. I'll see you soon then. Bye.